Yeah, that seems to work. All right. We good to go? Yeah. All right. So thank you for your time. My name is Etienne Pellepret. I'm Director of Product Management at Unizin. And over the next hour, we'll be talking about the UDP, the Unizin Data Platform, and how it's going to solve every single problem you never knew you had, or at least aggregate some data for you. So there are many ways to state it. There are many ways to phrase the big problems or the big challenges we feel we have in the use of data and the development of analytics or data practices to impact the student experience and to do that at scale. There are many different ways to say it. This is one of the ways I've been stating it recently, which is one of the main challenges we face as universities, driving digital teaching and learning practices, driving digital education, doing that more with data, is that today our teaching and learning analytics practices or data practices are too disconnected from the student experience to have impact at scale. That's not to say that there isn't a lot of innovation or pockets of innovation or small projects that show promise, or that we're not all trying to work with data in some way, but there's some immaturity in those practices, and there's still some challenges in being able to understand what's valuable in the use of data and analytics and to do that at scale. That itself is a big problem. So Unizin's role in helping to address this challenge is to enable the data ecosystem, enable the existence of a data ecosystem in higher education. There are a lot of parts to that, there are a lot of moving parts to that, and we'll cover on those. But the basic idea we have is that if we had a data ecosystem today in higher education, a unified, stable, rich data ecosystem, universities would be able to integrate data, all data from all tools, where that data and those integrations are built on standards, where your time to integration is not 1 month but 1 hour, right? Plug and play data integrations, and where the integration and use of that data is directed by institutions, by universities, all in the service of a set of scalable teaching and learning practices that use that data, whether it's advising or course development or research, right? When we think about those in an ecosystem context, we think about life cycles of those practices, right? Course development and design has a life cycle, and there are certain ways you might use data at different parts of that life cycle to inform design or to adjust design or to improve design or to ditch content or adopt new content or whatever it might be. Whoa, that didn't come through. So there might be some other, in the translation there might have been some issues. I noticed them in a few other places too. So I was going to ask you if you had the PDF on your... Okay, maybe we should... You can read it? It's sort of... it's not that much. I'm worried about the rest of some of the other things I saw in the rest of the deck. Okay, I'll read it. So we're going to talk a lot about the Unizin Data Platform, what it is. There's going to be some diagrams that suggest some, what it is technically, but I wanted to just foreground that it's three key ideas for us right now. The first is that the UDP is an institution's teaching and learning data platform. It is intended to function as an institutional teaching and learning data platform, which means that it will integrate all tool data from all systems to provide a unified view of the learner. Right? That's really what we're trying to get at, a unified view of learners in their learning environments, using interacting with content and courses that we have designed. Another big idea of the Unizin data platform is that all of the data that comes into that data platform needs to be in a common data model. There are many advantages to the challenging solving the problem of transforming data from a variety of different systems who speak in different languages about the same kinds of ideas, but translating that into a common data model, a lingua franca for teaching and learning data. But there are huge dividends you pay or you get down the road in the use of data if all of that data that's coming in is clean, modeled in a single representation in single language. The third big idea of the UDP is that as a consortium, if all of our data is coming in and getting translated into a single data model, a common data model, a standard data model, it becomes much easier for us to develop ways of using that data, whether it's in services or products, that in a way where we can collaborate on them, in ways that are common themselves. So a common set of data products and services built on a common foundation that ideally is driven by a lot of standards. I just thought I'd put this here. It's an oversimplification, but it's a useful oversimplification. When we talk about data in teaching and learning, we really tend to talk about one of two kinds of data. One of them is what we could call entity data. It's things and descriptions of those things. Like, this is a student, it's a person, they've got a first name, they've got a last name, they've got some ACT scores, they've got some SAT scores, right? Those are all attributes of a person. And there are many different kinds of entities that make up the space of teaching and learning data. There are students, there are courses, there are modules, there are module items. All those things that exist and that you create and that people interact with, that's entity data, right? It describes things in their relationships. And then there's event data. That tends to be behavioral data. It's sometimes called process data. It's noun, subject, verb. Or subject, noun, verb. I was bad at whatever. I didn't take my English classes, but you get the idea. It's this event happened. Someone took this action. And that tends to be, very small chunks of temporal data. This just happened. When we think about real-time data, it tends to be driven by event streams or event data. And those are two sufficiently distinct kinds of data that you need to think about them as distinct kinds of data that a data platform would need to manage, but they fundamentally both inform each other about what's happening in any student's teaching and learning experience. So for example, you may have heard of Canvas Live Events. Canvas Live Events is an event stream that's coming out of Canvas. It more or less corresponds to students' clicks, right? Student clicked this assignment and opened it. And what you'll get in that little event data is not a lot of information. Right, it'll just say, Tom opened this assignment and started this quiz. And that could be like 3 events. To interpret those events, you need some rich context. And that context tends to come from the entity data. Anyway, I'll come back to this distinction a little bit later. So this is not intended to be a technical diagram, although it happens to be a little bit like that. It's not intended to be a reference architecture or anything, but it's intended to describe what role the Unizin data platform is going to play, or we hope it plays, for our institutions. So I don't know if it comes through. You see the purple boxes? Does it actually come through as purple? Purple-ish? Gray, grayish? Purple, gray. Well, there's some gray ones on the left, but the one in the sort of rounded box in the middle and the rounded box on the right, those are intended to communicate what the UDP, the Unizin data platform. On the left side of that picture, you have a representation of all of the tools that you might use to drive teaching and learning, right? These are systems, these are tools. These are your LTI tools that are launched out of the LMS. This is the LMS itself. This will be the student information system. There's a lot of data in a student information system pertinent to teaching and learning, particularly if you think about analytics. Learning analytics research, we know that demographic information tend to be important independent variables in effective predictive modeling about students' outcomes. And then you may have some teaching learning tools that are not launched from the LMS, but that's the idea. On the left side of this, you've got everything. You've got the universe of teaching and learning tools. And those are going to, you can extract data out of them basically in one of 3 ways. Those tools may emit an event stream, and so you may just get thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of events per minute coming out of those tools and just getting peppered with those events, small events that are getting sent over the web somewhere. They may also make their data available in batch form. So big chunks of data. Think about a big data dump of entity data, right? A sort of a big dump of from your student information system. Or they may come from what are called APIs, which are ways of dynamically extracting information from a system. And all of that data about teaching and learning needs to be integrated and ingested into an institutional data platform, right? You need all that data to serve what I'll get to is a range of persona and practices and consumption patterns when you actually want to use that data. So that big box in the middle is intended to represent the parts of the Unizin data platform that we're developing now. That data, all those data forms get sent to the UDP. It goes through a common data modeling engine. I'll talk about that a little bit later. It lands in some foundational stores, and now you've got an aggregated set of data in a data platform on which you can serve data in a variety of ways. So on the right side of that diagram, you've got another purple box that represents pretty big categories of methods of consuming data. If you want to serve research, you want to be able to deliver research data sets that cut across different parts of the data you're aggregating into your data platform. If you are developing tools, you may want to actually consume that data via your own APIs, your own application programming interfaces. If you're doing anything in real time, you're likely to want to consume some real-time event streams yourselves, right? So there are many ways of consuming that data in a way that's useful for advising practices, real-time interventions, tool development. There are many ways that this data can serve our universities in their support of student success. There's a kind of loop that's being described in this diagram. You can see it at the bottom. Those data-driven educational practices at the bottom, research, analytics, BI. I know that Florida is a performance funding performance state. Basically, you've got to show a bunch of metrics at the institutional level, and Tom and I talked a little bit about this at lunch, and there was a great keynote at the last Unizin Summit about this. But you have to represent, you have to calculate metrics about how your institution is performing in student success. So there's a bunch of BI use cases for the use of data and predictive modeling. And the basic idea here is that all that work at the bottom is work that institutions need to be able to do or want to innovate in that is dependent on having a unified, aggregated set of teaching and learning data in a platform that makes it easy for them to consume that data. And that's what I think every institution is lacking today, is a way of doing that effectively and at scale. The idea being that what we do with that data feeds back into the learning environments that we're designing. So that's the loop that we're intended there. And the work in the content in the purple boxes here describes what Unizin is doing to help fill out that picture. Rob mentioned this morning, the Unizin Learning Laboratory. Many of all of our founding members, most of our universities are R1 universities, they're research universities. And one of the primary motivations of some of the founding members is to turn their own research faculty onto the problem of teaching and learning data. And Rob mentioned this morning too, is that in the area of learning sciences, the field of learning sciences has been around for decades. But unlike, say, poli-sci or social science, there exists no aggregated data sets that are standard for the research community to work on when it comes to understanding teaching and learning. There are bespoke data sets, people have curated their own data sets, but if you're in the social sciences, you've probably interacted with the General Social Survey, you've probably consumed data sets from ICPSR, which is maintained by the University of Michigan. These are national organizations that maintain data sets that are foundational to certain academic disciplines and research disciplines. In any case, the basic idea here is that many of our institutions' research faculty want to perform their research on data sets that come out of that go beyond their own institutional walls. And if our institutions are each getting their own Unizin data platform and we're integrating all of this data and commonly modeling it, it makes it much easier to generate consortium level research data sets and consortium level research practices, because the data has all been integrated, cleaned, modeled in the same way. Oh, this didn't come through super well, but it's good enough. We have a phased development plan for the Unizin data platform. So I'm pivoting here from what it is to when we're developing it and when you can get your hands on it, and how we're approaching the development. Generally speaking, we've outlined 4 phases of development for the UDP. The development of the UDP's ingestion capabilities. Those are the abilities of the UDP to integrate and store data. It ingests data. The phase around consumption. So that's supporting your institutional consumption of data, right? You getting data back out of the UDP. And that's really about defining and developing and delivering institutional data services. Those first 2 phases are institution level phases. They materialize the UDP as an institutional resource, as an institutional teaching and learning data platform. Those next 2 phases on down the line are really about supporting consortium level uses of teaching and learning data, primarily around research, but not necessarily around research. So contribution, the verb contribution here, refers to institutions choosing to contribute some or all of their data to aggregated data sets for the purpose of research or what it might be, and in return benefiting from being able to use data that's at other institutions, but again, commonly modeled and clean. And then research, which is consumption patterns effectively in service of research practices. If we put this on a timeline, timelines are always wrong, but some of them are useful, just like models. The green line is supposed to be where we are today. It probably should shift a bit to the right because we're at the end of spring now. But we intend the UDP's ingestion capabilities. So you see that we've been squarely in developing the UDP's ingestion capabilities. And I'll get to what it's integrating in a little bit. And we expect that green dot where UDP goes general availability is really just the UDP's ingestion capabilities become generally available to our consortium. That's what that means. So you'll be able to start standing up a UDP, pointing your data at it. I'll get to what kind of data. And you'll stop losing data, particularly event data, which I think everyone is dropping on the floor right now because no one's capturing it. That will kick off the development of the consumption phase. The phase of UDP development where we focus on supporting the use cases you have for consuming data and building purposed ways of delivering that data for those use cases. It certainly can be the case. How many of you here use the Unizin data warehouse? That's Canvas data in Redshift. So Instructure makes a product called Canvas data available. It's a data dump. They provide it every night. And we host it in a database technology called Redshift. And Redshift is, there are many different kinds of data store technologies, and they're designed to do different kinds of things. If you want a transactional system, you really want a relational database. If you want a system that's good at generating analytics, you want a different kind of data store technology, right? Different tools for different purposes. And those of you who have been using the Unizin data warehouse are using it generally in ways where it feels a little bit slow. And that's because that data store technology is not designed for the way most of you are consuming data out of it. So the selection of the technology used to store and serve data is really important in making, you need to have your use case in mind. So part of the challenge we're going to encounter in the fall and thereafter is that you're going to have a whole bunch of data in your UDP. And you're going to be tempted to just start optimizing as best you can around some raw foundational stores that are more or less like blunt instruments. And what we really need to develop together is some hypotheses about the use cases and validating those together so that we can build services on top of the foundational layers of the UDP that are purposed tools in your tool chest to solving that particular problem that you need solved, right? Not using wrenches to hammer nails into walls, that kind of thing. All right. So I thought I'd end there, not end the presentation, but just in that section there. This was, you know, when you talk about data and data platforms in the UDP, you necessarily spill into some technical details. That's not the intention, is to go too deep on that. The punchline here is that Unizin and its consortium, we are on a path to aggregating, integrating, and making usable teaching and learning data. And what we need come September is to start getting driven by the consortium around the use cases for that data and delivering solutions and services that are purposed to meeting those needs. Any questions so far? Well, before I get into common data model. All right. So you may have noticed I talked about it at the center of this box. There's a big gear that was intended to communicate that as the UDP receives data, but before it stores it somewhere, it transforms that data into a common data model. So if you're a student information system, or if you've got a student information system over here and you've got a learning management system over here, it's going to represent many of the same ideas, right? Both the LMS will have a representation of a student, just like the student information system will. But they may call those two ideas different things. What you call a course, I may call a course offering. What you call a class, I may call a section. Every system is going to have its own idiosyncratic language for representing the world and organizing its concepts, which makes it a pain when you're integrating data from multiple systems to reconcile slightly different verbs and nouns for the same ideas. Right? You've sort of got to translate everything into a common set of ideas. And it turns out that the labor of using teaching and learning data for research and analytics, a lot of it tends to be around this core data management problem. I've got data that's coming to me in different formats, right? Some of it is tab-separated files, some of it is comma-separated files, some of the names are different for the same ideas. You have to merge, clean, aggregate, organize that data into a way that you can use it. Well, that's really common data modeling, and it's upstream work that really should be done in a standards way. So why do you need a common data model? Well, you need a common data model because you want a relatively stable, singular representation of the world. Right, when you get data from Canvas and a Pearson MyLabs and a LearnSmart tool, if you're able to get that data from those vendors in the first place, you're going to see slices of the world, right? And they're going to call different slices of the world differently. You need a unified, singular, stable representation of the world, and you want a single common data model to do that. So you need a lingua franca for teaching and learning data, right? A language we all speak. And you need a unified ontology, which is a slightly different problem that I hope to illustrate a little bit later, but essentially refers to the fact that Andrew over here, Andrew is going to have a user record in the student information system and in the learning management system. And if he's using any LTI tools, those LTI tools are going to have their own user records for Andrew. And what you don't want on the data consumption side is you don't want a bunch of redundant records for Andrew, right? You've got 6 systems that have Andrew's data, and what you really want to consume is just one unified set of data about Andrew, not have to figure out, okay, Andrew is Andrew McDonald over here and Andrew over here, right? You want a unified ontology. You don't want data split up. Oh, that didn't come through so well. So our starting point is standards for that common data model. When it comes to event data, we are supporting IMS Global Caliper. That's the name for the event data standard. The Unizin data platform requires that data, that event data, be in the Caliper format, in particular Caliper 1.1. So that is it will reject any data that is not in Caliper. When it comes to entity data, things and their relationships, we're starting with what's called the Common Education Data Standard. It's about 7 or 8 years old. It was funded by the federal government and the Department of Education to provide essentially a data dictionary. It's really a data dictionary for systems in higher education. but it has tended to focus on the administrative side of data systems in higher education. And so we have found the need to extend both standards to model teaching and learning data. So for example, CEDS or CEDS has some provisions to model ideas that you would get in Canvas, courses, course sections, enrollments, but there are other gaps, modules, module items, assignments. That's just not standardized from a standard data dictionary perspective. And so we have extended both standards as needed to create a data dictionary and a data model that we're using to translate all data we receive into. So when we do integrate, I don't know, Top Hat data, right, since we have an agreement with Top Hat, when you do integrate that data, we do translate it into this common data model when we integrate their entity data. They already, if they send caliper data, it's already aligned to the standard. There is a link there to some documentation online for those who are more technical and curious about not just the data dictionary, but the underlying relational model and the caliper endpoint and its behaviors and how it validates all that stuff. So if you're interested in how it technically all works, follow that little bit.ly link and you'll be taken to a website that has more than just a data dictionary. We maintain that. It's always the most recent version of the UCDM, which stands for Unizin Common Data Model. Rob's right. We can't think outside of acronyms. But that documentation is maintained there as well. This is this bleeds off the page, is slightly outdated. Gives you a sense of what we call the entities in that data dictionary. An entity is a thing. A person is an entity because a person is a thing. An academic term is a thing. A course offering is a thing. So these are all different entities. The numbers in there represent what's called elements, which are attributes. So a person has a first name, that's an element. A last name, that's a different element. So we're starting with a relatively small data dictionary. I think maybe 20 entities, something like 200 or 300 elements. But there's a core substrate of ideas that cut across all teaching and learning tools, and that's where we're focusing on right now. The data dictionary, the one online kind of looks like this. An entity will break down into different elements, and there'll be descriptions. This is a pretty conventional way of having presenting a data dictionary. So I wanted to get back to this idea of a unified ontology, because again, integrating and storing data seems pretty straightforward. And it can be. You can integrate data, and there are different approaches to building teaching and learning data platforms that really just take data as it is and puts it somewhere. And then you need knowledge of how every different system represents its data to make use of that data. So it can be pretty straightforward to integrate a bunch of data and put it somewhere. But you incur a lot of debt if you just store things in their native format when you want to use that data down the road, because it's downstream that you have to figure out what data means. It would be better for our researchers and our tool developers and the development of real-time analytics services if they just assumed that everything was already described in a common language. You want to learn that language once for the data, and then you can build anything you want with that data. But it takes a lot of work on the front end, upstream. At the time you get that data is the time when you really need to do the heavy lifting of conceptually modeling it in a consistent, standard way. And there's a reason why there are not too many data standards for this, is that it's hard work, right? It takes a lot of effort to do that. So I already mentioned that we translate into a lingua franca, a common set of entities and concepts and ideas. The other thing that the UDP will do when it ingests data is recognize that the data it's getting from different systems may be about one singular thing. So I've got Fred Smith here, but it could be Andrew, who in these different systems that are driving his online education, he's going to have distinct records with different identifiers in those systems. And what the UDP does is it says, okay, I recognize that all of this data I'm getting from these different systems is really just about Andrew. And so in the UDP's own source, it says, I'm just going to create one record, one unified representation of Andrew as a learner. This pays a whole bunch of dividends down the road. I get questions, for example, sometimes about how the UDP is going to handle Is it GDPR, the European Union requirements and the right to be forgotten, and when that hits our shores? And I say, I'm not really sure how we're going to tackle that, but I can tell you that if we've got a data platform that attempts to unify data about individuals in a singular representation, it makes it easier to enforce those kinds of regulations. So there are a ton of advantages of taking on the heavy lifting of not just integrating teaching and learning data from different systems, but translating that and unifying that data into a single, unified, stable representations of learners, of learning environments, and of the processes that unfold in them. Entity data and event data, I wanted to come back to this because in almost every case, if you're using one, you need the other. And it can be very difficult to actually do that. So let's say you're trying to look at a particular student's behaviors in a class, and you've got an event stream that you've stored somewhere that describes, Rob's precipitous decline what explains that? What explains that precipitous decline? And if all we're ever getting from the event stream for Rob is just he interacted with this quiz and this quiz item at this time, and you see a click stream. How do you interpret a click stream? The only way you can interpret any kind of click stream or any kind of process is with some understanding of the context, not just in that classroom, but for that learner as a whole. So entity data or relational data or transactional data that describes things and their relationships tends to be the necessary context you need to interpret what happened, when all you get is a trail of events that happened. Or reciprocally, if you want to understand, for example, the effectiveness of your course design. So a course design, when it's produced, is an artifact. It's an artifact that from a system perspective you're going to represent as a set of modules and pages and the relationships between those things, and it's an artifact that you can instantiate in the learning management system. And the question is, how does it perform? What's the effectiveness of that particular module which is new? Right? You need to go to the behavior data to interpret how a particular course module or course as a whole performed. So it can be very challenging but necessary to be able to figure out how to bring these two fairly different kinds of data together from a data use or analysis or any other perspective. The common modeling that we do enables you to do that. It enables you to say, I've got this course and I've got this module, now fetch me all of the behaviors of students who interacted with that module. And it could be across many courses, right? It doesn't have to be across just one course. And reciprocally, if you're getting real-time analysis and real-time behaviors, you may want to determine whether or not to take action on any particular event by referring to some context data. So you need those two fairly different, distinct kinds of data in a unified way. And the UDP, again, through its common modeling, and I'm going to make up a word, ontology unifying capabilities, lets you do that. So these are very technical things I've been describing. My intention has not been to just deliver them, say, look at all the cool technical stuff we're doing. What we believe is that this kind of common modeling work is a precondition to doing anything effective with teaching and learning data. Almost everything with teaching and learning data. I won't say everything. But we need to have single, stable representations of everything that's going on in our teaching and learning environments in a language that's standard and consistent and unifying. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to do anything effective with teaching and learning data. And we see this across every aspect of life, right? We see this in our legal contracts and the importance of wording to describe intentions and what's going on. We see this in everyday life. We all have to speak the same language to exchange ideas. It's the same thing when it comes to data too. But it is early. It is early in the analytics journey. And I say analytics, but I really just mean data and analytics and the use of data and analytics in higher ed as a whole. I think it's early. I think the maturity is fairly low. I think we have a lot of ideas about potential use cases. It's not hard to come up with many, many different use cases for teaching and learning data, for advising, for course design, for instructors, whiz-bang dashboards that we could throw together that would inform. And there are plenty of pockets of innovation we can point to describe that, right? I'm sure every institution here, and it's certainly the case that every institution in Unizin has pockets of innovation, the standout faculty, right? The standout instructors who want to go right into the deep end on data and come up with dashboards and incorporate that into their everyday practices. But they are your innovators, right? They are not the norm. They are not at scale. They are not going to be what everybody is doing. And from a technology perspective, from an ecosystem perspective, we're also pretty early in the process. Our standards are fairly immature. Rob pointed this out this morning. You know, Caliper's on 1.1, and it was on 1.0 last year. It's a pretty young standard. CDS is only 7 years old and still has a bunch of gaps that need to be filled. One of the things Unizin does a lot is work with vendors who are implementing their data integration capabilities for the first time, and I haven't had a meeting yet with a vendor where they didn't say, hey, what are the use cases for this data? And how can we, what do institutions want? And you go to institutions and they say, well, we have a lot of ideas about how we could use it, but we don't know yet. We need to run a lot of experiments. So I'll say this is my opinion. We have relatively low maturity practices when it comes to data and analytics in higher education. We also have a fairly early and budding technology ecosystem. And the two of those are going to have to mature together. So I think we're only starting to understand what kinds of analytics are impactful, are useful, what kinds of things are impactful to measure, how predictive modeling can be accurate. And suppose you've got accurate predictive modeling about a student, right, that predicts how a student is going to do on day one in a course. A lot of us are wondering how we should even use that data, how we should even use that information. Should it be presented to students or should it not be? Does it introduce bias or does it influence their behaviors in one way or another? We just don't know. There are also a bunch of skill sets and mindsets we need to develop, to cultivate, to figure out how to use data and analytics effectively. Everyday teaching and learning practices. How are we going to incorporate data and analytics we develop that we know might be effective into everyday practices, into habits? Right, it's one thing to just deliver the instrument, it's a different to use it on an everyday basis. So the perspective we have on this general problem of data and analytics in higher ed is that there's a bunch of innovation. Our role right now, from a technology perspective, is going to be make sure that universities have the ability to own and aggregate all of their teaching and learning data. We're taking on the hard work that we know we're eventually going to need, which is to unify that data because it's a precondition to using it well. But at the same time, we need to mature and cultivate the maturation of people and practices and standards together in relationship to the technology, because it's not just one thing on its own that will solve this. So I'll go back to this timeline and that blue phase, that consumption phase that is supposed to begin in the fall, where institutions will begin consuming data that they are integrating and pulling into their Unizin data platform. I think that that consumption phase is going to be marked by a lot of experimentation in the next year. And Unizin will be proposing to its members a method of collaborating around the experiments that it runs, right? I have a hypothesis that this use case is valuable. Here's what I would need to validate or invalidate that hypothesis, that this kind of dashboard information would be useful to introduce in front of instructors or students at these points in time. Let's surface that at the consortium level, figure out how to support it with the Unizin data platform, run the experiments in the fall or in the spring, and then report the findings. There are a lot of good models in higher education institutions for doing that. Grants or the grant model, right? Grants are premised on wanting to figure something out, articulating what you need to do it, and then yielding some information that you then share back. So I think we need to, I think we're going to focus on not just sort of raw bulk consumption of the data you're integrating that you may be seeing for the first time in the fall, but on driving validation of potential use cases through experimentation. That's really what we're going to need to do as universities. And by the way, the vendors are doing this with you all the time, right? When you're piloting products for them. Behind the scenes, they view those as, yes, you know, the gateway to a full-scale adoption, but they are learning from those pilots. They are conducting their own experiments in those pilots. Often vendors will approach a pilot, choose between 3 different pilots. They'll choose the ones that are most experimental because they want to validate their own ideas and potential use cases for the use of their product beyond the current methods it's being used. So the vendors are already doing this, and they're doing this with your data and the data that you give them. We should be doing this ourselves too, and we should be working with them, but on terms where we own that data and we drive its use. And by we, I mean universities. So it's not like experimentation is new or is unique to what universities need to do. It's what everybody needs to do. So there are, I think we'll talk about this a little bit later in the presentation I now know I'm giving later. But we have a few different activities we're conducting within Unizin. How many of you have heard of the Learning Analytics Community Practice, the Unizin LACOP? Okay, so a few of you. But all of you are invited to come. This is a monthly meeting. We've been doing it for almost 2 years. It's an hour-long webinar. I think it's the first Friday of every month, or it could be the second Friday of every month. It's an hour divided in 2. The first hour tends to be an institution that is reporting on its learning analytics initiatives, and the second half, or first half hour, and then the second half hour is usually an update from Unizin about what it's developing in support of learning analytics. And learning analytics here I'm going to use as just a umbrella term for everything from institutional reporting on student effectiveness to predictive modeling to the use of dashboards to everything else. So we have that research, and that is a primarily research community that meets on the assumption that it has research initiatives to talk about with each other. And we've seen some collaboration at the consortium level come out of that, but not as much as we need. The other thing that Unizin does a lot, I mentioned this, is that we work with vendors. So in our Top Hat purchasing agreement, there are a lot of stipulations in those contracts that require the vendor to conform with data standards and to provide data to institutional UDPs when those go online. And that has become standard language in our agreements and has been there for a while. But we do that. We also work in working groups at IMS Global developing standards. So we sit in the working group for the development of the IMS Global Caliper standard. That's the event standard for teaching and learning data. We've contributed to that standard. We're active members in it. I think that we'll probably be doing a few other things with IMS Global in the next 6 months or so around data too. And then technology, we build a lot of technology. We've got about 20 people. I'd say over half of that is product engineering. Maybe 10 of that is engineering at this point. So we are a consortium, but we also have a technology startup. And so we build a lot of technology. So we have to mature these practices together, and I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
On the third-party integrations with Pearson, Cengage, and those types, will it matter whether they're going through Canvas to get there or they're logging in separately because you have your master record surrogate ID? Are you going to be able to put the two together if they went straight to Cengage or whatever it was with a Cengage login instead of their net ID from their institution through Canvas?
Not everything can be commonly modeled. There are 2 ways of saying that Andrew's record over here belongs to the same individual as Andrew's record over here. There's a deterministic way of doing that. Record A has an explicit reference that it belongs to record B. And there's a way of inferring that. Oh, and you have levels of confidence in doing that. If I've got 2 systems that represent you and both of them have your social security number and I detect the same social security number, I can infer that you're the same person. that becomes a lot riskier or a lot less confident with birthday, right? But you can then put birthday together with a few other things and get higher confidence. So it's not a certainty that you can always unify the ontology for those things. However, when it comes to event data from vendor tools, if they're going through an LTI launch, that LTI tool is receiving in its LTI parameters the learning management systems identifiers for a course and a user. And when the UDP ingests data, so let's say it gets an event from Connect or fill in tool here. If it's getting an event data and it sees a learning management system identifier in that event payload, what it's actually keeping track of inside that UDP is essentially key mappings. It's saying, okay, this Connect ID maps to this learning management system ID, which maps to this SIS ID. And that's how it's a crosswalking table. And that's how we, on ingestion, will detect that we can look up something in that crosswalking table and commonly model it to an existing record for whatever, if one exists for that thing.
So the recommendation is to try to push faculty to use the positions and not go outside if you want to get the third party.
Yeah, at the moment, we want to leverage LTI and the LTI standard and enrich LTI because you need more than just a user ID and a course ID, which is what currently comes through by default. Now, Canvas throws in a few more. There's a general, one thing we generally need to do in the vendor ecosystem is mature the quality of their event payloads, enrich them. There's more data we need to do these things than we are currently getting. I don't think the vendors are to blame. They have operated a little blindly in determining what's in those event payloads. What I'm finding is that in our conversations with Toppat or Macmillan or McGraw or Pearson is that we're coming to them with tangible, concrete reasons why we want certain things in those payloads. And if you look at that documentation I linked to, you'll see a whole page about documenting recommended practices for designing your event payloads that allow the scenario that we've just described. But it'll be a journey.
Hi, I'm Robert from FIU. I had a quick question about the UDP and historical data. Does it store historical data when it comes to what a student's grade was, say, in February, in March, compared to what it is today? So if we want to see trends and do research as to how that student's grade changed, we can?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. Typically, your institutions are already taking snapshots at particular intervals throughout the year of your data for the purpose of historical and kind of longitudinal study. So the short answer is yes. How about that? I won't go on too long. Yes.
And one other question. In addition to the SIS and the learning management system, are there other data sets you're considering to pull in data? For example, we use Salesforce to do outreaches for students, and we really want to see how those outreaches are helping improve the students' grades. Are you planning on having any other data sets to pull in?
Yes. CRMs as a class, as enterprise class solutions, it's been interesting to see how institutions have embraced CRMs, and they're driving more of not just the kind of business and administrative side, but the intervention and the teaching and learning side. So I'll give you a little bit of a we need institutions that come to us and say this system is important to integrate into the UDP, and then broker the discussion with Salesforce, where we go figure out how to do that and create a standard integration for Salesforce or Workday or whatever it is you're using.
And I guess my last question is, how do we become part of the UDP pilot?
Rob?
So I hope you get a better feel for the complexity of the effort. And so the very first thing you have to do is really consider the commitment that your organization and institution will be making. This isn't a 1 or 2 person effort. There's estimates, and I don't think we shared them today, of the hundreds of hours per institution that are required to do this, and most of that heavy lifting is at your institution. So any of the folks in the room use EAB? And that only took you a couple days to get that stood up, right? So at IU, it took us about 2 or 3 years to ultimately get all of the data that they were interested in dynamically integrating. And UDP borrows a lot of the similar elements from the SIS. So right now we've got the 4 pilot institutions that are the founding members. Subsequent founding members will likely go next, and then we'll just start queuing up whoever is interested to make that kind of investment. It is an investment of months. So we just want to fully inform folks that are considering it when you're ready to make that commitment, that it is a full and formal commitment.
This is Jawahar from UCF. So what's the business model for UDP platform and the pricing model, or how you try to price that for the data? Are you going to have a package, or for community college it's the same and university is the same, or how are you going to measure the price?
I'll take part of it, then you can fill in the rest. So the short answer is that we still have to figure out the proper cost modeling for a lot of this data. I mean, relative to event data, SIS data, Canvas tools that are used by students, from the perspective of event data, you over just a couple of years, you get to petabyte scale, petabyte scale data footprints. And that doesn't take into account the cost of running any number of data services and products on top of that data, right? ETL jobs to feed data marts that might go into your BI tools, or real-time event streams back to you that are, that are computing things dynamically, or whatever it might be. So what we're focusing on right now is cost modeling the ingestion and storage, and then there will likely be some separate cost modeling for the services that are built on top of that. And that's a problem we're taking on right now from a technical perspective. Rob can probably fill in maybe the way we're thinking about that from a business perspective. I'm sure there will be some packaging of some kind for these services. Not quite sure what that's going to look like yet.
And I think that's the majority of the information at this point. Again, that's why the founding members are going first. They have paid a substantial amount to get to this point and to stand this up, and they're also willing to bear the cost of their resources doing those integrations as well. So the staff and people resources on their end just to do the ingestions and then maintain those integrations and connections. I think ultimately, and did evaluations there, so if you have to go back and respond to a privacy officer or a security officer or anything like that, those are the kind of things that we've been doing in preparation for the point where we're at, leveraging a lot of the founding members' resources to ensure that we've kind of checked all the boxes, both from purchasing to security to privacy and policy associated with this. So.
You mentioned the potential experimentation that we could all do, and I'm curious if Unizin or any of the members have given some thought to like consistent research protocols that people should follow associated with that, or some sort of standard processes, or are you guys just really focused on just standing it up right now?
Standing it up right now. I call them experiments, but they're not, but again, an umbrella term for ways of investigating particular use cases with data to validate that they might be useful. It doesn't necessarily need a formal research protocol in every case to do that. I mean, I think some experiments might be generating a few data marts because I have an idea about what kinds of data visualizations to present in a dashboard tool. And that could be it, and there could be a little bit more to that, but that's not a research proposal that needs to go through IRB, and well, it might, but it doesn't necessarily need to go through IRB and that whole process. So there are a couple different models we might borrow. We're only starting to think about how to do that. But I think if we get into fall and institutions are just We talked about this at lunch, just sort of say, turn it on, give me access, and then I'll go dive into it and go dark for 6 months, and I'll come back when I found something useful. Then I think we miss an opportunity to act collaboratively as a consortium and to learn from each other and to do things together and to build relationships around a common set of challenges that we want to solve together. So to the extent we can create the conditions for those kinds of collaborative models to succeed, I think we should. Sounds like you're volunteering, Tom, to figure that out.
All right, do we have any more questions for Etienne? All right, thank you so much. Okay, right now we have an afternoon break built in, so there are tons of food in the back, so please take one or some or many because we have a lot, and we'll be back at 2:15. doing with their data. So first up, we have from FIU Online, Danielle Cespedes.
Do you guys hear me? No? Do you hear me now? Yeah? Okay, awesome. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Daniel Cespedes, and I'm a data analyst at FIU Online. And I'm glad to have the opportunity today to be able to showcase what we've been doing with Canvas data and Unizin. So we'll go ahead and give you a little background of what's been going on in the last 2 semesters at FIU. In fall 2017, we officially started the migration from all of our courses from Canvas to, from Blackboard to Canvas. And starting this summer 2018, we will be officially running all of our courses through Canvas. That's been a big ordeal, and it's also posed new challenges for our team in terms of data analytics. We already had built out some reports in regards to student analytics for instructors, for our success coaches, and since we were moving to Canvas, a new LMS, a new data structure, so it meant basically recreating these reports from scratch. So this, like I said, it posed a challenge, but it was also it's been also an opportunity, considering that the data structure with Canvas is a lot cleaner. We've been able to finally create, by the end of fall, we created a Canvas course profile dashboard, what we call, and which is focused on student performance. And I will go ahead and do a live demonstration of the tool that we have created. We piloted it in spring with a set of students from our dual enrollment sections. And they follow slightly a different structure than FIU Online regularly would follow. They have facilitators, which are like student coaches, that they're in charge of contacting the students and making sure they're following their assignments, they're doing their assessments, etc., which is similar to what our success coaches would do with our fully online students. And this dashboard focuses on 4 main parts, which are the course overview, the course grade in Canvas, an assignment and submission analysis, and a course activity analysis. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of here for a second. Oh, didn't work. Let's see. There we go. All right, so to give you a little background of what this dashboard is built on, we're currently using Tableau as a reporting tool for all of our analytics. And the reason we use Tableau is because it allows us to not only tap into Canvas data through Unizin, but it also allows us to mix all this data with other data sets. So to come up with this report right now, we're able to mix this information with our SIS, which is PeopleSoft. We also cross it with our Salesforce management tool, which is our CRM. And this all of the cross of these 3 data sets gives live to this one dashboard, which is the course profile dashboard through Canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and explain a little bit of what we're seeing here. On the top, as you can see, the user is able to filter the dashboard through 4 different filters, which are the semester, the course that they would like to look at, a student name, or if they want to drill down to a specific student in the course, and the student plan. Now, obviously, the course and the semester and the student is coming from Unizin itself, from Canvas data, but the plan is not necessarily stored in Unizin. So that's coming from our SIS directly. So the dashboard is crossing all of this information. So the first section of the report that you're seeing here is the course overview section, and it gives you 5 key metrics of your course. You see 5 tiles, which are the enrollment in the course, the average class grade, which is basically the average class grade overall in the course, coming from the score in Canvas, the average number of forum entries per student, if your class currently has active discussion boards, and the average number of logins and the average number of interactions per student. Now, it's important to know these because we use these averages in order to calculate and put students in buckets, whether they're performing within, below, or above the average of the class. And one of the interesting things about the dashboard is that every box that you see is clickable. So what the dashboard allows you to do is to give you at a glance view of how your class is performing, but you're also able to drill down to the student level and see who are the students that are falling behind, so you can go ahead and start outreach to them. So the second section we have here is the course grade benchmark section. And what this does is it provides you with a visual representation of how your students are performing in the class. We use 3 colors to differentiate the students. Blue, if you see anything in blue, it means that the students are performing above the average. If they're in orange, they're within the average of the class, and anybody in red would be below the average. So if I'm looking at this class right now, I see that most of my students are above 85 of a course grade, so that's good. They're performing well. However, we can see here that there's 2 here in this bucket, and there's 1, and then there's 4 under this bucket as well. So those are the lowest performing students. If I'm in the situation of, let's say I'm a student success coach, and this is a live course, right? Say we're in the middle of spring, and I'm noticing that, hey, I have 4 students that are falling behind in this course. I can go ahead and go into this dashboard, click on this box, and you'll see a menu that pops up that says View Grade Details. So if I click here, what the dashboard will do is it'll take you to a list of who are the students that are comprising this bucket of 4 students below the average, right? So obviously, in the regular report, you would see names. I've stripped them out from the report. But you can see that these are the 4 students that are the ones performing below the average. Obviously, their course grade is 70 and above, 70 to 74. But if we go back to the main dashboard, I believe the average grade was 81 or so. So obviously, they're below, or 91. I'm sorry. Another feature that we have in the dashboard is that the student success coach can directly from here go into the student analytics page in Canvas. So they don't have to log in, they don't have to go into Canvas and start searching for the student in order to send them a message. Or if you're an instructor, you don't have to go in and start looking for this information. If I click here, obviously it's gonna prompt me to log in, but once I'm logged in, it'll take me directly to their page where all the analytics are also detailed, and with the access to start sending a message to the student. So let's go back to the course dashboard here. Let's continue on here. Then we have an assignment benchmark and a submission analysis section in this dashboard. So it's 2 parts. The first one is just the assignment benchmark section, and what this does is it breaks down all of the assignments in your course that are graded, and the dashboard will will get the average of the assignment scores for each of your assignments and bucket your students again into below, within, or above the average. So if I'm an instructor and quiz 1 just finished, I can see here, for example, that nearly 80% of my course did well. They fell within the average of a score. However, there was 20% that was below the average and that performed poorly, I guess, and for quiz 1. So I can, again, same functionality. I can click on the below average bar and click on assignment details and see if I start contacting these students and seeing what was the issue. We can see here the average was an 84, and some students did 50, 40. So those students would be obviously a set of students that would need to be reached out to see what maybe they didn't understand the content, or the quiz was not what they expected. They didn't study for what the quiz was expected to be. And the second part of the assignment and submission analysis is the submission analysis itself. This allows you to see when are students submitting assignments to your Canvas course. So say we are going to look at the discussion board analysis. I want to look at when are students submitting their main post for the discussion. Obviously, in a discussion, when you're creating a discussion, you want engagement from the students, right? So you want the student to be able to post and read through other posts from other students and reply and interact with their peers. So we can see here that the orange line is the due date is February the 7th was the due date for this discussion, and most of the posts happened within January the 30th, 31st. So that's about, let's say, about 7 days before this discussion board closed. So that tells us that there's been plenty of time for students to go post their discussion post and look at other posts and reply to students and have that interaction that's needed, that's expected from a discussion post. And lastly here, we have the course activity section of the dashboard. And what this does is it looks at it breaks your students again into those 3 main buckets based on your logins, the interactions that happen in the course, and forum entries, if any, in the course. And we know that there's a direct correlation between the higher the interaction in the course, the more engagement that there is, the better the course grade of the student. You know, the more chances of the student passing the course. So we believe these 3 were important as well. In terms of feedback for the dashboard, the facilitators from the high school we worked with loved the dashboard. They were very happy that they had a quick access to the information that the course was generating. The same for administration in the school, and we've tweaked the dashboard based on their feedback as well. One of the things that they wanted was, well, this is great, obviously seeing all this information easily, right, and seeing, okay, my students are performing well. They wanted to see if there was a way to pull up a roster of your class and just at a glance see what are your averages and where are you performing lower than expected. So what we created in the enrollment tile here, we can click, and what it'll do, it'll take us to a roster view sorted by from the lowest performing student to the highest. And we can see, for example, for this one student, you know, their grade was 70. That's below the average. They've logged in 102 times, which is also below the average. They've posted 12 posts to discussion boards, which is as well below the average. And the page views, which are interactions in Canvas, also below the average. So if this is a live course and you're within a month of, it's been a month now, right, of the course running, we are able to start reaching these students in order to improve their chances of passing the class. And like I mentioned, since we're using Tableau, we're able to cross this information with different sources. So in this case, for example, the success coach, if it's an fully online course, is able to go to Canvas analytics of the student selected, or also their Salesforce record, which we host to see what outreach has been taken, what's their major, etc. So our plans for this dashboard is to actually release it this summer. We're going to open it up to all fully online courses. since it's a great start for instructors and success coaches to start using this information and utilizing it to improve obviously pass rates and retention and graduation ultimately. And overall, I mean, I think one of the great advantages that we have is that Unizin already gets all this data in their model, and we're able to tap into that information easily. And I think the UDP, I mean, it's very sounds very promising because a lot more can be done if there's a more common data set instead of having to go ahead and look finding the keys to different users or records in different databases. One of the challenges I think we had when building this dashboard is that while Canvas Data Warehouse is a little bit newer, I think the structure is clean. However, back when we used Blackboard, we did have a bit more of structure when it came to understanding, summarizing facts in terms of interactions and logins. Right now, Canvas only has one table, which is called requests, and that hosts all the sessions, all the page requests, which are the interactions from all the users, and it's not summarized. So it's a bit of a work. We had to do some workarounds into summarizing this data ourselves in order to be able to just crunch it and throw it in the report quickly. So I hope you guys like the dashboard, and if you have any questions.
Do we have any questions for Danielle?
Overall, how many users use this analytics platform?
At the university?
Yeah.
So the institute. So we're FIA Online. We started using Tableau about 4 years ago, and that's about 200 users. But in the last 2 years, our institutional research department adopted Tableau as well. So now they have reports that are open to all of the university. So I would say any employee has access to this report.
So how many groups, different groups like executives? Are there anything for students too?
So I don't think there is any reports just yet for students. In terms of, do you mean in terms of overall or just like Canvas Analytics?
Or any insight you want to show for students?
So for students, I believe we only stick to right now to Canvas Analytics, the page that they have access to, their analytics, but we don't have any reports created just yet for student facing. Since we're doing Canvas, creating dashboards from scratch now, our goal again is to create these dashboards for our success coaches, the advisors, and also for the instructors, so they can go ahead and utilize this data that they're generating every day.
Okay. So you have LDAP integration, or they have to log into different systems?
Yes. So this is they have to log in just once. It's through I can't remember the name of the integration, but yeah, it's only once.
Okay. Got it.
I was just curious what the largest course that has used these analytics has been in terms of enrollments, like 100, 200, anything larger than that?
So this is actually the largest course. We've piloted with 2 courses. Like I said, we only did it for our dual enrollment students, which were 2 courses in Canvas at that time. This was the largest with 138 students in it.
Thank you. It's very cool.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any more questions? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Up next, we have Shay Silverman from UCF, and he's going to do a demonstration of the student performance dashboard.
Okay, you can all hear me now? Cool. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shay Silverman. I am the lead of our integrations team here at the Center for Distributed Learning. We make faculty, staff, and what I'm going to be showing you today is our first student-facing LTI, and this is our student performance dashboard. Now, this is mostly a live demo, so nothing's going to go wrong, of course, but let's see what happens. So just bear with me for 1 second as I get this all loaded. All right, cool. All right, so essentially how this presentation is going to go is I'm going to show you our demo version of our student performance dashboard, and this is our old version, and then I'm going to show you our latest one as well as some of the ups and downs we've had while creating this. And it's been a very interesting process trying to develop our first student-facing dashboard. We've been able to get analytics and data for faculty for some time. We've been researching data for our coaches and our advisors, but at the student level, there's a whole infrastructure and ecosystem of data that they want to see that is something that we haven't known about. And essentially, let me make this a little bit smaller, just so it's a little bit easier to see it all. Okay. So essentially what we've done with this is we held some focus groups with our part-timers who work for us, our student employees, and talked to many students basically about what they wish they had known within their, when they were, while they're in their course. You know, things that we wish we had seen when we were in undergrad, things that they wish they could know about right now while they're taking their course. Just information that they know is available to them, but they haven't been able to find. So essentially what we have gotten from their feedback is they really want to know what assignments are due soon, very easily figure out what their current score is. This was a little idea that they had asked about, can we know how many days are left in the academic calendar right from our dashboard, right from our course, and know how many days have passed? And then something that we've tried to give them are their short-term goals. Like, hey, if you get 7 points on your next assignment, you may be bumped up to that next grade level. So take a look at that. Our very first feedback in a tool that we worked on for a long time is our score estimator. And I'm lazy. I'm extremely lazy. I don't want to, if I don't have to put in that effort on to get that A, you know, I'm going to probably do that. I'm not like that anymore, but I remember my undergrad. I spent more time trying to calculate how to get that B, how to get that A than I did actually spending time on the assignment. And that was dumb of me, but I'm not that person anymore. But we get a lot of students asking, like, we want something a little bit better than the what if tool. We need, I would like to have a more visual experience with that. And that's kind of what we created here with that feedback. We pull in the assignments that are currently due, and we let them see, okay, this is my score. I have a 70 right now. If I get 100% on these next assignments, how are they going to affect my grade? If I got that, okay, if I failed that, that's going to bring me down a grade level. But if I do really well on this creating a website assignment, that's going to bring me all the way up to an A. So this is the type of feedback we've gotten. Students want this, and we've created that. We also made it even easier for them to figure out. They could see if they go all the way there, what's going to happen. So yeah, we want them to be able to quickly figure out how to get that A and then spend their time on their assignments doing that. Yeah. The next tab we've created is a performance tab, which I want to say this is all pulling straight from the Canvas API. These two tabs are just purely Canvas API data that we're pulling in real time. And what we're doing here is showing how the median of the class is done in the current assignments versus how you've done. And in Canvas, you have the capability to show the range of grades from the lowest to the highest. Not all professors do that. So we do have the option, if that's turned off in course settings, it pulls that via the API, and we can turn off the 100% of students so that they just see the median versus how they're doing. So that's the performance tab, another thing that the students had requested. And then our $1 million tab, the one that has caused us the most issues, but also we have put so much time in trying to develop and wrestling with the Canvas data, the Redshift platform, the Unizin data warehouse. This is our behavior tab. And this is right now just a demo, what we were trying to develop as. This is some of the feedback we got from students. This is what they would want to see if, I'm going to just bring this to, let's say, a C level. They want to see how their actions in the course are doing compared to the other grade levels in that class. So a C student, okay, they can see that they're pretty much doing the same amount of logins, posts created, the responses, but they're doing a lot more comments. And whereas I may have only been doing 4 comments, all right, well, let me see what a B student is doing. Okay, I'm doing even more posts than them, but those comments given, okay, they're a B and they have 13 comments. This is an insight that this course is probably heavily graded on comments, and I should probably be doing more. Go to the A grade, can definitely see that same thing is happening. So we are trying to tell them what behaviors could be better in this course. Now, we had piloted this for a few semesters and then got the feedback, took it down, and we've been retooling a bit based off of the feedback from the pilots and the feedback from students that we are grabbing from our part-timers again. We're doing more focus groups and stuff like that. So the good and the bad. I'll start with the bad. Florida weather. Going out and doing focus groups outside in front of our student union. Oh man, we got rained out the first time we tried to do that, and it's hilarious to see a bunch of techies just running with so many laptops, like trying to get out of the rain and get back under the union. That was fun. We got one piece of feedback before we had to get away from the lightning. But the really good feedback that we got was that students basically they want to know how to succeed in these courses, and it's not about being lazy or anything like that. They just want to know what this course is looking for. And what we found is a lot of students have anxiety that they're in the same place as their other students, which will lead me to, that's really small, isn't it? Okay. To our latest version. As you can see, we've cleaned up a little bit of the graphics, add some more color, and our new insights table. One of the big things that our students were telling us is they have anxiety that if they're in an online class and they've never met the other students, they don't actually talk to the professor except online, am I in the same space? Am I in the same module? Am I catching up? Am I surpassing, or am I way behind from the other students? And that was something I had never thought about. Our group had never thought about. It was one of those like, oh my God, why didn't we think about that? They want to know that they're there, that if I'm spending so much time on integration strategies but I'm seeing that all the other students have already moved up to part 2, the student activities page. This is the type of data that they are looking for. So we've started to implement that and pull this from the Unizin data warehouse. Another good, the students love giving feedback about this. And the second we ask them, hey, what do you wish the type of information you were seeing, it's just a fountain of information. They just let us know. And that was, they gave us amazing feedback. One of the questions we asked was, how do any of your professors give you information that you wished other professors would give you? And because if they're giving you information, maybe we can pull that from the APIs or from the platform and then give you that information as well. We found out that one of our professors here has historical information, anonymized historical information going back 10 years of all the exams and all the grades that he's given, and he lets all of his students see that. And that was something that the students who take his CS class liked a lot better than some of the other CS classes they might have taken, because they were able to see how well they were doing over a decade, how well they were doing compared to students from a decade ago. And it was a really neat insight. We have no idea how we could do something like that in here, but it was very interesting to hear some of the data that they have seen and have gotten used to and what they wish they could see from the LMS. One of the bad things is every time we show this and get the feedback and give demos, the students all say, oh, this would be great. We want this in our class. We want to use this. The bad part is when classes start, students go and they'll click on everything. The first day of class, this is useless. There's no data here to really show them, and they basically have no reason to go back. So we'll see that they'll click at that first day and then never come back to it the entire semester. It's just not anything that they think will help them throughout when they have their assignments, their syllabus, all that, which is giving them data from day one. So that is something that we're trying to figure out how to get that message across. Come back here during midterms. Come back here after your first assignment and see that there's some useful data here that can help you. And we've tried doing some other things, like maybe installing it in the middle of the semester and then giving messaging, hey, you have this new tool available to you. Why don't you try it out? There are a couple things that we have ideas for. We have an LTI that we're now piloting for faculty called Faculty Tools, which is an LTI that launches LTIs. For a long time, we've had a Success Resources LTI built into Canvas that links to, that's for students. It links them to SARC, the Writing Center, Student Accessibility Services, some successful me videos, and the UCF libraries. One of the ideas is they know throughout the years that that is a resource they can click on all the time and is changing throughout the months. Let's put a link in there that will then launch that LTI there and show them the data. So they already know to click on this multiple times through the semester. Rather than giving them a new tool, let's integrate it into a tool that already exists. And with that, I am open for questions. Yes. I will say before I take that question, I am very excited for the Unizin data platform because that looks like it's going to be amazing for a lot of what we want to do. Because, yeah, a lot of these behaviors and these insights are taken from the request table, which requires a lot of calculation overnight and gives us some a little disadvantage where we're waiting 24 hours before we have data available to show. So we're a little bit behind. We've looked into the live events, and it's amazing data, but we need something that we can pull as fast as possible and make this as real time as possible. So yeah, UDP is going to be awesome. I can't wait to try that out.
So Shay, my
Yes.
question is, are you looking at data specifically to this section of this course real time, or are you going back over other sections in the course?
So this is all real time for this specific course, this specific section, what they are enrolled in right now. And kind of the thought behind that, and this may change over time, is that we have all of this historical data of the user, whether it's an EAB or PeopleSoft or what have you. We have all this historical data. The students now can see their data in real time, what's happening, right in the moment for them, and that's where we're trying to get to it. And then as we move into more phases, when this becomes faculty facing and advisor facing and coach facing, they can then pull that data and see how they'll have that historical data of their students, and then they can see, oh wow, something happened this week with my student, or an advisor can say, something's going on with the student in this past month. Let me call them in and see what's going on. That's the idea for later. That would be like the phase 2 or phase 3. But right now it's a way for them to see, for the individual student to basically try and keep up.
I was just going to make one comment on why we chose it to be course and section specific. Every single course is designed differently, and every faculty member has their own style, even if they're teaching the same course. And then you got different modalities between fully online and blended and face-to-face. There's no way you could norm the pedagogy, the grading schema, the strategies across all of that variability. The only way it works is if you're at an individual section level. So in one section, say you had this in 2 courses and you're a student, in one course, discussions might be really important, and they could go and look at how they're doing in discussions. But in another section, it might be a face-to-face course or a blended course where all the discussions are happening face-to-face. That might have 0 weight. And so you would have to look at the behaviors in context, in comparison, based on that particular course.
Any other questions?
We're required to, in the syllabus you put the last date to withdraw and those types. I noticed you had, days since and days coming. Do you think it's an idea to give them some other milestones throughout the semester or anything of that nature?
That's a really good idea. We have our current version that we're getting ready to pilot does have the academic calendar pulled in. So one of the ideas is to have the withdrawal date on there. It'd be interesting to ask students what kind of milestones they would want. Probably the midterm, when the midterms might be coming up in the syllabus, when the final exam might be coming up, and how many days are left until then. So yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you. Anyone else? Questions, comments, suggestions?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much, Shay. So now we're going to talk about some of the Unizin subcommittees, and this is a really good place for everyone to get involved. You saw so much about what we've been doing, what is available to us. And this is an opportunity for us to see what other institutions are doing, not just in Florida, but outside of Florida, and an opportunity to ask questions. So I know Etienne is going to give us a little bit of an overview of what the different subcommittees are and how we can get involved.
Okay, that works? Yes. Hey, I get to not talk about something technical. That's good. All right. Well, I alluded to this earlier. I think Rob alluded to it this morning. In addition to Unizin as a consortium of members, each doing their own cool things, and in addition to Unizin staff in Austin being primarily a software technology startup, Unizin has a committee structure who's at the consortium level of practitioners essentially who are interested in collaborating to drive the interests of the consortium on a few different fronts. So these are practitioners at their own institutions. Many of them come from CTLs or IT organizations, and they operate within domains, data analytics domain, affordable content domains. And often what you get out of these committees is initiatives, joint projects, in addition to those who also serve a function of informing what the Austin team is doing. So they have a few different functions, but they are all highly related to the strategic goals of the consortium. But they're different. They're a different kind of activity than most of what I was discussing earlier, which is really actual engineering and product and service development from a product engineering team. So the overall name for this group is the Teaching and Learning Committee, and then that committee has subcommittees. So I guess it wouldn't be hired if there weren't a smorgasbord of committees, and we have a growing smorgasbord of committees. So if you hear the Teaching and Learning Group or Teaching and Learning Committee, it roughly corresponds to now I think something like 70 or 80 people from across the consortium. I think when it started there were 20, 25. So what that cashes out to is something like 3 to 6 or 7 people from each institution sending staff that have an interest in some of these things. So I thought I'd quickly discuss the ones that have existed to date, and Jennifer's been on them for a long time. And then out of the last one came some ideas for some new subcommittees. So the punchline here is that if one of these committees resonates with an area of practice you care about or are in, it's something you will have no problem entering and participating in, and you will learn more about what Unizin is doing within your area of practice or what it is you care about, and you will likely be able to contribute. There are no preconditions here around adopting services or being a full versus system member. This is for the consortium, and these are opportunities to collaborate with peers in the areas that may touch on Unizin services and technology, but may not necessarily, and are intended to innovate to drive those things. So just thought I'd put that out there. The Affordable Content Committee, obviously Engage and Order Tool and the inclusive access model and opt-in and opt-out is intended to lower the costs of publisher or proprietary course materials. And one of the reasons for adopting Engage and scaling the adoption of e-text or digital course materials with Order Tool is to get some affordable content in the hands of students across your institutions at scale. But affordable content is not reducible to reducing the price of publisher content through demand aggregation. It's also the creation of open educational resources or low-cost resources. So the Affordable Content Committee thinks about different ways of reducing the costs of education through content. One of the most recent and interesting initiatives that came out of this committee was an event called Content Camp. This was spearheaded by Ohio State last year. They're doing it again this year. And the premise for Content Camp is that oftentimes faculty choose textbooks because they'll come with quiz banks or other ancillary materials that make it valuable to them in reducing their time to teaching or just enrich their learning experiences. And oftentimes faculty will shy away from adopting open textbooks or low-cost textbooks because they do not come with those ancillaries, be they quiz banks or PowerPoints or whatever it might be. So Content Camp was an event over a couple of days that pulled together subject matter experts from across the consortium who generated thousands, at the end of the day, thousands of quiz bank items or assessment items. And they had decided which subject matter, which courses, they thought about your lower division, general ed courses, biggest bang for the buck type ideas. And then they shared those. And then they shared those quiz banks. The assumption being that they could be paired with low-cost textbooks or OpenStax textbooks, and they would be viable alternatives to what publishers are currently offering with their bundled offerings. So that is not a, oh yeah, Jennifer.
So, as you may know, here in the state of Florida, we have an OER eText coordinating committee, and one of the things that we're talking about is a content camp for the state of Florida. So who's with me? Content camp for Florida. So we're going to be talking with folks across the state and different institutions and get something going. So we're going to do it here in Florida. So I just wanted to let you all know that we're going to do it. Oh, Jim's got
Because you brought that up, we just sent someone up, a political science professor, because I think the content camp actually just happened.
Okay.
Or it's happening now or something, and we sent up a professor to work on some of that content for American government. And so I think when he comes back, I'd be happy to share out and report kind of what his experience was, and then we can maybe glean some of that and to help in our creation if we decide.
Yeah, so we sent a professor last year to last year's content camp, and she said it was great. She said it was a great experience, highly recommended it. It was organized, so from the faculty perspective, it was really great. So we're going to see about getting support from the provosts. Yeah.
So there you go. You don't have to take my word for it. Anyway, this committee is involved in many other things, and the goal here is that there are many ways to getting to a content ecosystem that enables choice and that enables an affordability at the same time. Part of what Content Camp is responding to is the fact that faculty make the choices they do make, and we should meet them where they make those choices. But there are a variety of ways in which this committee is spearheading other initiatives. Press books and creating open books or shareable books is again, I mentioned this, there are 300 books total now across the consortium. So the will is not lacking, the technology is not lacking, there are plenty of opportunities to make an impact with affordable content through Unizin. The Communications and Marketing subcommittee has, their task is to ensure that there are open and free lines of communication across the consortium that keep the consortium informed about the consortium. This is really about creating a public sphere for the consortium. So it's not just reducible to communications and marketing, but those are the names we typically give to those kinds of activities. And it's about promoting what institutions are doing. It's about promoting the development of Unizin services and products. It's about promoting and circulating that kind of information. Analytics, data, and soon to be UDP successes. So there's a real concerted interest and a high interest in becoming more data driven. Across the consortium, that is a shared interest. What tends to be the case, I have found, is that different institutions have taken a different cut at the general problem. Penn State, for example, has said, we really think there's a bunch of potential value in real-time analytics, and we're interested in consuming event streams. Some other institutions, maybe some of them here it sounds like, have said dashboards are kind of the way we think we might make an entry into more data-driven teaching. And some of that has been as success coaches on the advising front, some of that on the course designer front. So the Data and Analytics Committee has made it part of their activity to share what they're doing. These are, I mentioned the Learning Analytics Research Subcommittee or Community of Practice. That really is research faculty coming to share. It's a little bit different than the Data and Analytics Subcommittee of the Teaching and Learning Group. They're more IT staff or CTL staff who are developing tools and developing initiatives around data and analytics. So they're less research and more development or service development. So I think this group is, obviously turning their attention to the UDP. I mentioned the experiments we're going to have to run in the fall and thereafter to really suss out what's valuable in the use of teaching and learning data. And this is the group that's really going to drive that. The Unizin and Structure Solutions Subcommittee, all of our institutions have either fully adopted or nearly fully adopted on Canvas. This subcommittee has been undergoing a kind of identity transformation of late, sort of out of their adolescence into adulthood. Initially, that committee looked a lot like individual Canvas customers who wanted to, bubble up a set of priority lists and have a consortium level relationship with Instructure, and to sort of drive solutions development with Instructure. And what it's turned into more recently is a group that is trying to generate some consensus around not quite moonshot projects, but larger strategic initiatives rather than just incremental feature improvements in Canvas. So while initially it was a quasi sort of democratic, what incremental feature improvements do we think Instructure should really know we care about in some kind of prioritized punch list, now has turned into what's the one thing that we think is absolutely critical to the consortium's big goals, and for which Instructure and Canvas in particular is the singular partner. Because most of those other institutions are on, like a lot of the Big Ten schools, there's a Big Ten group or an R1s group that Instructure has a relationship with. So the question has been, what is it that Unizin uniquely cares about in the development of the learning management system, given our consortium goals? And what are we going to propose to do with Instructure that helps achieve those one or two big goals? So the proposal that's under review right now by this subcommittee is actually around data integrations and live events in particular. There's a little bit of a gap in the Caliper standard around how a tool that can emit event data knows where to send it to. How do you configure that tool to send its data to FIU's UDP, right? Just as an example. Or to put it even a little more specifically, when the Canvas launches an LTI tool that has a caliper capability, a caliper sensor, how does it tell that tool where to send its events to? How does it configure that tool to send its events to a particular UDP endpoint, or whatever endpoint? It could be a learning record store of any kind. And how does it know what credentials to use to send an authenticated event to that endpoint? That's actually a gap in the standard, and it's a gap that is going to be filled by the learning management systems and tool providers, and probably some third-party arbiter around authentication. It could be LTI, should be LTI. So there's a proposal on the table to solve that problem. We care about it, Unizin does, because without a solution to it, you can implement all the LTI tools you want that support Caliper, but they're not going to want to know, they're not going to know where to send their data. So this is a big strategic ecosystem problem, and we are going to propose to Instructure that we focus on that one big problem together until we solve it, to get a true plug-and-play model. So I won't go over this too much, but I think this is supposed to represent, sorry, this is not my presentation. Rob had an earlier flight than he thought, so I'm just pretending to be it. You get a discount version of Rob, a lesser version of Rob. Um, so I think this is supposed to represent the main focus of these subcommittees for the next few months. And you can see that the Data and Analytics Committee is really focused on UDP adoption and preparing for those experiments that we're going to run the next academic year. And that bottom one, strategic co-development of live events, that's the way that group has formulated the problem I've just described, that around caliper integrations. There has been out of the last teaching and learning meeting, which is at the beginning of April, we have one every 6 months. The next one is mid-October before EDUCAUSE. There's a proposal to develop a few new subcommittees. And the libraries have always kind of been in the conversation in Unizin. There are people in the teaching and learning group who are in the libraries or come from some of our member libraries. By their nature, of course, libraries have an interest in Unizin's affordable content initiatives. Every library licenses a ton of content, and a lot of that content, not most of it I think, but a lot of it, is used for not just scholarship, but teaching and learning. And should be part of the affordable content solution at any institution. Should be easy to discover and adopt that content for use. So the question has always been, how do you bring that data in? How do you bring its catalogs that are well curated in, its collections, those kinds of things? Most libraries still deliver things like course packs. Shouldn't that be delivered in something like Engage and launch and the data from that? And then learning analytics is the other one. Every service delivered to students on campuses, you know, they want to understand the efficacy of their service, and libraries are no different. They want to understand how the services they offer to students have an impact, contribute to their success. There are parts of libraries that teach, right? Instruction librarians. There are subject area librarians. And they're just beginning to get on this journey around learning analytics. There's a lot of data generated by library systems, but libraries, I think, are a little bit of a laggard in this space, mostly because of debates within that discipline about how their professional ethics around anonymity, traditional professional ethics around anonymity, may or may not conflict with their service mission, which is increasingly to serve teaching and learning. So there's a lot of interesting things going on there. If you're really interested in the intersection of libraries and learning analytics, there's the Unizin and IMS Global and I think EDUCAUSE Learning Initiative recently participated in a grant. It was called Lilla, now it's called CLASS, C-L-L-A-S-S. I can just ping me and I can send you more information about that. But in my view, it is the best effort to date to bring the libraries into discussion, technically and conceptually, around learning analytics in libraries. So I think this is a committee that's going to materialize soon. Application developers. I was referencing this a little bit earlier when I was talking about the Unizin data platform and one of those domains of practice that would want to consume data. Here in CDL, you've heard about a couple of tools that they have developed. At the University of Michigan, there's a entire division called Academic Innovation, and within that there is effectively a software incubator for teaching and learning tools. So faculty or instructors will embark on some exciting pedagogical journey and build some tools around that. It shows promise. They bring it into the Digital Innovations Greenhouse, which is an incubator of like something like 15 developers, a few user experience developers, a couple of product managers, some services staff, and they'll try to scale that solution, that tool that's used in teaching and learning, and then ship it out once it's mature. So it's an incubator for teaching and learning tools. And most of our institutions are investing more, not less, in software developers, in application developers, because they recognize the need to build tools in service of a diversifying set of pedagogical techniques and instructional techniques, which makes a ton of sense from a maturation perspective, right? As you begin to mature practice like online education or digital education, you start to specialize. So aside from perhaps consuming data from the UDP in the form of application programming interfaces to accelerate development, the consortium has an interest in sharing projects. So I think Tom mentioned this morning that Course Monitor was a data dashboard solution that Unizin embarked on a couple of years ago and then abandoned. Well, we've really just said, a couple of institutions have said, we're really interested in maybe looking at that code base and running with it. We've said, well, here's the source code, and there you go, and run, use it to your heart's content and do what you want. The Centers for Teaching and Learning, there are many members of the overall Teaching and Learning Committee who come from CTLs. CTLs do a bunch of different things. The CTLs do a bunch of different things. So the interests here are varied, but as you can imagine here, a lot of it is about, a lot of institutions view CTLs rightly as a place where we can start to get some practice maturation in the habits of instructors and faculty members, right? It's training. You provide training, you provide coaching, you provide an introduction to new tools, and so there's interest in maybe doing that. Faculty engagement is a similar thing. It's more on the marketing side, as I understand it. But you get the idea here. It's about culture change and change management and changing practices. So these are proposed subcommittees, but their nature is responding, I think, to the fact that more and more tools and offerings and systems from Unizin are being offered, and the question is, how do we drive their adoption and development at scale? That's really what's going on here. So you're getting committees that are much closer to the practitioners. I assume those links go somewhere useful. Those here links go somewhere useful. I'm not totally certain, but I think that one good place to go is community.unizin.org. That's where a bunch of different forums are. It's a set of forums. I hope that one of those links goes to mailing lists that you can join, if you haven't already joined them. There are no restrictions, no secret passcodes, no knocks that you have to just ask to join, and you'll be on those committees. And then I guess October 16 and 17 is when the next teaching and learning group meeting is going to be. They're always actually I shouldn't say that. They have mainly been in Chicago, but one year it was at Oregon State. 1 year Oregon State hosted. So if you really want to go about as far as you have to go from here, we should just vote for Oregon State again. And then, by the way, you have to make a choice. You fly into Portland or somewhere else that's 2 hours away, and then you got a bus ride through. So just prepare for your 24 hours of travel. I think that's it. Yeah.
All right, do we have any questions, Etienne? No? All right, thank you so much. Up next we have Tom, who's going to do the closing. But before, I just wanted to mention a quick thing about just having a liaison at your institutions. I think that's really helpful because there's so much information coming out of Unizin, and to have that central point of contact, I think it's really helpful. So at UCF, it's me, but I'll work with Jim on Pressbooks, or I'll work with John on Engage, or I'll work with Shay on the data. So I think having that person there that they can reach out to, and usually, I mean, they're very responsive. Every time we send an email, they're usually contacting us very quickly and giving us all the information we need. So I have to do a quick shout out to Lynette because she's absolutely awesome at Unizin. So yeah, I think something to think about at your institutions. So right up next we have Tom, who's going to be doing our closing.
Lean. All right, so, man, we run an efficient meeting, right? We're ahead of schedule. Nobody's ever complained about being let go early. A couple of comments. One is that many of you probably already know this, but the materials are all available and I believe have already been sent out to all of you on the email list. Whoever registered got a copy of the materials. I didn't say this this morning, but I'll say it now. One of the reasons that that I was interested in having this meeting was because sometimes over the time that we've been a member of Unizin, we've felt, those of us in some of the system schools, a little bit like ignored stepchildren. Like we didn't know what we didn't know, and we weren't always in the loop in some of the communications. And it's not fair to ask the University of Florida, I think, to always forward information to the rest of the system schools. So one of the objectives here was to let everybody know kind of like what's going on so that you have a little bit more context and information. But I think to emphasize what Etienne said, get involved. I mean, you get out of this what you put into it. And join the community, join some listservs, go to a meeting. I think what Kerline said is absolutely right. Find somebody on your campus to be your single kind of point of content, to be the traffic cop for Unizin stuff, because it's not all embodied in one person. You know, Kerline named 5 people that are doing various Unizin things. And when I was looking at the upcoming groups, I was thinking, all right, now I got to get a librarian to come in and be in the library group. And so, you know, there's all kinds of people on campus that can get value out of Unizin, but having one person be sort of the champion internally is, I think, really important. If you join the community and sign up for the communications, you'll be much more in the know. I think last year, one of the things that got me a little like, was there was a meeting at InstructureCon of all the Unizin members. And I was probably eating a hamburger or something while it was going on, but because we didn't even know about it. And it was all through the teaching and learning group. And it wasn't like any sort of nefarious thing by Unizin. It just, we weren't on the original list. And so nobody ever thought to put the system schools on the original list. So I think it's important for us to kind of make sure that if we want to be involved, as you said, just get involved. I mean, everybody's sort of welcome. So I talked to Jennifer Sparrow, and she said, yeah, you should be a part of this. And it's like nobody even just realized. So make sure that you get out of this what you want out of it. And it's as much about Unizin providing information to us, but it's also about us going out and participating and being an active member and contributing to the community. So with that, I hope that that this was a useful day, that you learned something, and that maybe you made a contact or two. Speaking for UCF, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to any one of us, and we can refer you to somebody to answer questions. I was really impressed with that FIU thing. I might call Joseph, see what we can do about that. So anybody have any last comments or questions before we kind of wrap up? Okay. Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Safe travels.